Your automations probably work great when you're testing them, but everything falls apart in production. I know this because over the past 12 months, I've built AI automations for over 40 businesses and taught 15,000 people in the process. And I've had to learn how to handle errors in automations the hard way. So in this video, I'll walk you through the only 6 error handling techniques within n8n that you'll actually use to make your workflows more durable, scalable, and not break. Let's dive in. All right, so these right here are the different types of error handling techniques. If I go to the first one, we can see that it's called stops workflow. This is natively what n8n does in the first place. If something happens, so if you execute the workflow, if we start the automation and we go to the step that needs to happen, and let's say there's an error here, it just stops. It stops the automation. Now, why is this a problem? It's because when you have something that's running, when you're just relying on something to run every single time, if it stops, it will stop everything and it won't happen. Like it won't actually run the automation, right? So that's not something that we want necessarily. Let me show you exactly what it looks like right now. So we have an API that we're using to generate images. If I execute this step, this is successful because that's the way it's set up. Generate an image with this dog in a couch. Very nice. So this is successful, but let's say now I go here and I change the R for the F, right? And now I execute the workflow. So if I press this button, execute workflow, it will start the automation. It will then go here, and then it will say that the resource you're requesting could not be found, right? And that's the error that we got. And now the automation just stops. There's nothing that we do with the error. It goes from step 1 to step 2 errors, and that's all we do, and that's it. Okay, so this is right here what the error handling technique that n8n natively does. And it's not something that we typically want because there's no strategy behind it. There's nothing that we actually do with the error, which is where we go to the first setting, which is retry when failure. So if I go here, and this is the symbol that you get when you actually set this setting on. But the way that we actually add this, and let me add the execute workflow manually right here, is inside the actual module. So we're using the same exact API. When we go to settings, we can see that these are the different options for the error handling technique. We have retry on failure and we have on error. These are the 2 different types that you change when you want to implement some sort of error handling technique or error handling way. Now, in this case, we're using retry on fail. So what does this mean? Retry on fail just tells you that the maximum amount of tries. So if it stops working, if it errors out, it will try again this many times in this interval. So in this case, it will be 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. So it will try it 3 times before it actually stops. And again, this is successful. But if I change this to F, like I did before, it will error out, but it will take longer. So if I go here, I can execute the workflow. Now it's running longer because it's trying 3 different times. So what did it do? In essence, it tried once, it tried twice, it tried 3 times, and then it stops. So it does what this did. The only difference is that this tried 3 times. So when do we actually use this? Well, typically we use a retry on failure when we're using a server, when we're talking to a server that sometimes could not work, right? It could happen that it errors out for some reason, but it might happen or it might work in 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever it is. So that's why we put the retry on failure so that it happens, it tries again later to see if it actually works, and then it continues the automation from then. Right, so that's the second error handling technique right here is retry on failure. And we can go here, settings, retry on failure. We put the amount of times that you want to retry at 1 interval, and that's it. And then the on error just says stops workflow. So at the end of the 3 times, what do you want happened? Okay, so this is the second one. The third one right here is continue when failed. So this is typically done or implemented when we're doing an automation where the actual step itself, whether it works or not, it doesn't really matter. If it works, great. If it doesn't, no problem. And that's where we implement the continue when failed because it will stop the automation and then it will just continue either way. Because it will start the automation, it will go to the first node in this case, which is this one right here, to do whatever it needs to do. It errors out, but it still keeps the automation going. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. If I go here, now I can drag this across. Now, if I go to the API, this right here again is successful. But if I change this to F, like I did before, in this case, it should error out, right? But everything was successful. What does this mean? If I go here, I can see that it still said that we got an error. So bad request, 404, which means error because typically it's 200. But it still went. Why did it do that? Because on the settings itself, we put that on error. So what happens when the error occurs? In this case, we continue. So we pass the error message as item in regular output. And right here, it just doesn't accept for whatever it is. Right, and so this right here again is used when you're doing something that whether this works or not, it doesn't really matter. We can still continue the automation because the next steps are not dependent on this. Okay, and that's when you use step 3, continue on output, and you typically have this error right here, which will tell you exactly what it is. The fourth one here is split error route. Now this is one of the best ones that you can use when you're building automations because typically what you want to have is a way for you to send it one way if it's successful, but get notified when it's not successful, right? In this case, this is exactly what it is. So let me drag this across and let me put this to here. Now we can start the automation here. And in this case, it's successful. So this is all good. It works. So now it's basically saying, okay, this is running. If it errors out, if there's an error, we send it this way. But if it's successful, we send it this way. Okay, so you can imagine of the different use cases that you have. For example, you have an AI agent that decides to work sometimes, decides not to work sometimes, but you get notified when it doesn't work. It doesn't just stop. It doesn't just retry and then stop. But if it's successful, it just keeps on going. And this is great to get notified when automation breaks. And that's where we'd use this. So if I run this right here, it will send it this way because everything was successful and we actually got the image. But let's say I do F, I put an F here like I did before, get notified. If I go to the email thing, I would get an email saying error, and let me just add, I can just run this now. Actually, no, we need to write a message. So automation errored, and you would add more fields like what kind of automation or what the error was. But if I go here now, it will send it this way. Okay, so it will go here and say, okay, we got an error, and this is the error, and this is what the stack is, which essentially is a description of what it is. And then it will send it to the Gmail where we get an email getting notified when the automation error is out. So if I go to my email right here, I can see that right here, I got an email saying automation errored. Now the next step to this would obviously be adding the actual error. So if I go here, I can drag this across. So in this case, it will be message, right? And so when I get the email next time, so if I run this, it will error out, it will send the email. If I go to my emails right here, I can see here that I got this error. Of course, we can clean this up, but this gives me an idea of what happened because we have this request and we have this type of error, right? So that's what we want to have. And that's when we get notified when something happens within the automation, it errors out, it notifies us, which is great. All right, so the fifth one here is fallback agent LLM. So let's say I have an AI agent and we know that AI agent thinks through its chat model. So in this case, it's OpenAI, the way it thinks through what it needs to do. But sometimes, let's say the OpenAI does not work. And let me show you exactly in what case. So now I connected to OpenAI, but I made a fake credential. So it shouldn't work. So if I go to chat and I press hello, it will send the message to the AI agent. It will then send it here, but this will error out. And all it says here is authorization failed. Please check your credentials. Now this type of error is because I didn't connect it well, but this could happen very easily when OpenAI servers are down one moment to another. So we want to make sure that we have a fallback LLM in this case that we can use saying, hey, if OpenAI does not work, use this. So all we have to do to activate this is go inside the AI agent, and then we can enable fallback method. So this means connect an additional language model on the canvas to use it as a fallback if the main model fails. So if this doesn't work, what do we want to use? In this case, we had another option here, and you can just add another tool. But in this case, we already have it here, which is Claude. So now the way it would work is that we send a message to the AI agent. It will then talk to the LLM right here with the OpenAI because it is the first one. It will error out. And then because we have a fallback LLM, it will use Claude. So let me go here and say hello. You can see it went here first and then it went here second. And now I'm getting a response with Claude right here. Now this is great when you're building AI agents because of the fact that you don't want the AI agent erroring out every single time if there's a problem with OpenAI or something else. We want to have a fallback method, a fallback LLM that we can use in case that doesn't work, right? And you're always making sure that if one doesn't work, the other one does. So that right there is a fallback agent LLM. Number 6 is error workflow. Now this right here is something that we're going to set up live right now. Something that's very, very, very powerful because what it's saying is that we are running the automation, it errors out, but it sends a notification of the error to another workflow. So we can do whatever we want. Okay, so let me show you exactly how it works. So we will have to set this up in a different scenario, in a different workflow in this case. Let me go here, let me add this so I can run it. In this case, if I run it, it will work fine, it will be successful. But now, let's say I have this in another workflow. So let me go here, plus workflow, personal. I will have this right here, which is a blank canvas. I can paste this, right? So we basically pasted the error trigger, which by the way, you can find going here, error trigger, you'll find it here, right? And once you have this, you can connect the next step. So we get an error from a workflow, from a specific workflow. We send a notification here of the error that we got. And then what's the next step? In this case, let's just do Gmail. So send a message. Send a message to me. Subject is hello. Let's execute this step right here. Just so we have some data. Well, in this case, we can't because we have to fix this, but let's do hello. Let's execute this so we have some data to use. So now we can see that the test data that we get is the URL of the actual workflow. So in this case, the message could be, there was an error in the workflow. below. If I go here, I can add, well, let me just do expression. So I can pull in variables from here. I can say URL, and I can add a URL here. And then I can do error, example error message. All right, so what is this actually doing? This is saying we have the initial workflow, which runs, it errors out, it sends a notification to the error trigger, which only triggers when a specific workflow is errored out. And then it sends us an email saying, hey, this workflow errored out, this is the message, this is the URL of the actual execution, which I'll show you what that means, and do whatever you want with it. So you're informed and you're notified. Now, there's a few things you have to know about this right here. The first one is we actually can't activate this because this runs every single time without you having to activate it. It's always on, it's always turned on. The only thing you have to do is save it. So this is an actual scenario and then name it. So let's do error YouTube trigger, okay? And that's the name of the scenario. And to be able for the initial workflow to send the error to this one, we have to set it up on the other workflow. So in this case, all we have to do is go here. We go to settings. We go to error workflow. In this case, it won't be error server received, but it will be error YouTube trigger. This is just saying when something happens, when the error occurs, send it to this error trigger right here. And I press save. And another important thing here is that in order to make this work, the initial workflow that needs to error out to then send the notification to the other one, it can't be in testing mode, right? It needs to be in active mode. So we have to activate this here. Got it. But we can't execute it manually. So in this case, we can use a on-time trigger. So what does this mean? It means that it will run on a certain schedule. So in this case, we can run it every 10 seconds. So we can see exactly what it is. If I go here, I can activate this. So I can send it here. And let's put, in this case, it would be seconds. Let's do 5 seconds or 10 seconds. So we have a variety. And now when I press save, this right here will run every 5 seconds. And if I change the breed to F, which in this case will make it so that it errors out. If I go to executions, I can see that this errored out, okay? Because it errors out every 5 seconds, because it runs every 5 seconds. So if I go back to the error workflow right here, and I go to executions, I can see that now this is starting to run because the other workflow is erroring out. And it's adding more and more because every 5 seconds, the automation is running and it's erroring out. And if I go to my emails right here, I can see that we're getting messages. There's an error, there's an error, there's an error, more and more every 5 seconds because the automation is running and it's erroring out every 5 seconds. And it sends the information here, which then activates the Gmail. So let me deactivate this because I don't want to get emails every 5 seconds. But in this case, you can see all the errors that it got because it happened every 5 seconds because we added this schedule trigger and it sent the error information to the next workflow, to the error trigger workflow. Now, typically, this is the one that I use the most because you can connect the same error trigger to different workflows. So you can have different one of these and connect them all into the same error workflow here and do the same action, right? And get the same output. So those right there are the different types of error handling techniques that we have within n8n. Very, very important. Again, we have different use cases for each one. And these are very, very powerful when you actually put them into practice. So it's important for you guys to understand this because when you're building automations for just yourself and testing and playing around with automations, and when you're building it for a client, you want to make sure that you're minimizing errors as much as possible because that increases the perceived likelihood of achievement, perceived likelihood of your service, whatever it is, but also make sure that you don't have to be there all the time to just fix things, right? And n8n does a great job in allowing us to have those functionalities to make sure that we're able to go around errors and get notified or something else, make something else happen. And by the way, if you want the full template right here where you can just play around with the different errors and you can have this as a resource to go back to every single time you want to see how you can implement an error into your workflow, then I left the link down below. And now that you know how to make sure that your AI agents and workflows are durable and scalable, then check out this video on the screen if you want to watch me build an AI RAG agent system step by step where I actually put some of these error handling techniques to the test. With that being said, I hope you found value from this video and I'll see you in the next one.